So welcome everyone. This is the ins and outs of opening a B&B, a guest house, an Airbnb, a VRBO, or any of the above. I mean, it's all over the map. A lot of folks, you hear them say, oh, do you have an Airbnb? Well, actually, it's like the difference between do you have a tissue or do you have a Kleenex? Airbnb is simply an online booking site. What you have is a short-term rental. Now, the short-term rental, you can advertise many, many, many different places. You can advertise them on Airbnb, which is just one channel online that you can advertise. And so folks have a tendency to say, do you have an Airbnb, as if that's the item, but it's actually a short-term rental, just so everybody is a little clear on that. And you can actually advertise it on a lot of different channels. I personally have several short-term rentals, and I have them on Airbnb, but I also have them on some other online channels as well. And so I ended up actually purchasing a software called, again, it's called a channel manager, so that I can just sit down at my computer and look at my computer, kind of like a hotel front office. And I have all of those channels connected there. And what it does is it keeps me from having to go to Airbnb and then booking.com and then Expedia and all those others to chase, who's booking on what platform. So that's how I handle it, but we are going to find out how Taylor handles it and what she has to offer. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Taylor. I don't want to give away all of her secrets, because she's going to share with us a little later in the podcast all of the fun stuff that she's doing. So I am just going to ask her to give us a little bit of background about her family, and what she was doing before she got into the short-term rental business. So Taylor, tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So yes, so my name is Taylor. I am located just outside of the city of Boston. I have a 2.5-year-old who is very busy. She just started preschool, so she's very, very fun. We are loving it. And so our life is a little bit hectic right now because we're in the middle of a very big renovation, but things are great. So previous to starting in real estate, so I was in higher education. I was working as a director of regional operations and launching regional campuses around North America for a university in the Boston area. And I love operations. I'm a huge systems person. And I've been able to use a lot of my experience in operations and development in my real estate investing business. And the whole reason that we got into real estate investing, it was by accident originally, but was because we really wanted to create the time and financial freedom to spend with our family, just doing the things that we wanted to do. And I realized that in my W-2 job, I didn't really have control over my career trajectory or how much I could make. That was dictated by other people. And so there was a big shakeup in my university, and it was a big aha moment for me to change my roadmap.
That is so exciting. So what made you decide that you wanted to do a short-term rental? Do you have any long-term? Let me ask you that first. Do you have any long-term rentals?
So we started out with long-term rentals. That was the kind of the gateway.
Okay, Faye, you heard that. So you're in the right place. Faye said she has four already. So, okay.
Exactly. So we accidentally started investing in real estate when we bought a house hack. So we lived in one unit, rented out the other unit to cover a portion of our mortgage. And we became kind of addicted to the financial freedom that real estate can provide. And so we wanted to keep buying more properties, but we live in a very high cost of living area. And so we decided to start buying properties out of state. And so those were long-term rentals. We started building that up. And then when the world shut down in March 2020, I was 4 months pregnant, and my husband and I had to sit down and be like, what are we going to do? Like, what are we going to do here? And we completely pivoted from long-term rentals to short-term rentals because we really wanted to accelerate our journey to financial freedom and really increase our cash flow so that we could start working together sooner rather than later. And yeah, so that was in 2021, we made that decision, and here we are.
Okay, so now let me find out here. You had these long-term rentals in another state, and then you made the
Mhm.
segue into all short-term. Did you turn those long-terms into short-term, or did you sell those and purchase properties in other locations?
Yeah, great question. So what we did was we sold our entire original portfolio and
Oh,
we
okay.
reinvested into short-term rentals, also out of state.
Okay, now I don't know whether I froze there for a second or whether you did, but again, Taylor is my co-host today. So in case either one of us get bumped off the call, the opposite one of us hopefully can let us back in. And Dora, I see that I have you on. I am going to actually promote you to panelist if that's okay. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that's okay. And you can even leave your camera off if you want, but I'd like somebody else to be up here just in case we have some issues. She says, sure. Okay, so come on over, and then it's up to you if you want to be seen or if you want to stay, behind your name there. It's up to you. But I want to make you also a co-host. That way we've got another person on just in case. So
No worries.
thank you.
Technology likes to play games.
Yes, yes, yes. And Dora's a girlfriend of mine. So yes. So thank you. Thank you for that.
No
So
problem.
yeah, that way we have another person up here just in case for some reason we have some technical issues. Okay,
Okay.
so Taylor, you actually then sold your long term. And I'm
Mhm.
assuming for those of you that either are or are not into real estate, there's capital gains, there's taxes, there's all kinds of things that you have to consider in all of that. And there's Andorra. And so, Taylor, did you do a 1031 exchange over into the short term? Is that still considered like kind for like kind, even though it's long term versus short term rental?
Yeah, so we originally were going to do a 1031 exchange. We actually were working with the attorney to go through with the process. But part of the issue that we ran into was that our long-term rental properties were in the name of our LLC. And we were going to be purchasing these properties in our personal name because we were going to be buying the first property as with a second home loan, which could not be in an LLC with the mortgage company that we were using. So it wasn't going to be able to make that transition. So we weren't able to do a 1031 exchange for those properties, and that ended up being okay. I think that sometimes it can seem like it's the end of the world because you have to pay capital gains, but we put a lot of money into our properties
Okay.
and renovating them. They were huge value adds. So we didn't end up paying quite as much as we would have if we had been holding them for a really long time. They were turnkey. There's things you can do. You just need a really good accountant.
Yes, yes. So, I'll say that for the audience, for all of you that are listening, make sure that you do the math. Make sure that you work the numbers. We don't have enough time on this particular podcast to get down into the weeds on how you work the numbers, but I will say we do have a mastermind for the short-term rentals. So just get in touch with me, kathybinner.com. You see my name there in my little Hollywood square. It says Kathy Binner. And just kathybinner.com will get you over to my information. And we do have a mastermind. So if anybody wants to know more about capital gains and wants to know more about the tax situation of selling and buying and how you're going to use those funds, get in touch with me and I can have some conversations with you as well. So now that you've decided to sell the long term and now you're going to buy these short term, how did you decide what areas you wanted short term rentals in?
Yeah. So back when we purchased the properties, we were still kind of at the height of the pandemic and trying to figure out what was going to happen with regulations, because there were regulations prior to the pandemic, but once the pandemic came around, there was a huge switch up in a lot of cities. We actually were technically using our upstairs unit in our house hack as a short-term rental, but I don't count that as our foray into short-term rentals exactly. And the regulations in our area changed. And so we had to switch it back to a long-term rental. Not a big deal for us because it originally was a long-term rental, but if we had purchased that as a short-term rental, that would have been a challenge. So knowing that there was all of these regulations going on, we really wanted to buy in more of an established vacation area. And
Okay.
not to say that it's impossible to put regulations on an established vacation area, it's just harder. It is the entire economy of some of these areas. They need hospitality, they need these people to come in and travel. So we wanted to focus mainly on vacation areas that were very, very established. And so
Okay.
that led us to the Smoky Mountains was our first market.
I just came back from the Smoky Mountains. I was just
Oh,
there.
really?
I should have found out where your unit was and booked there. I just got back. We just got back Sunday.
Stay in Gatlinburg, or did you stay in Pigeon Forge? Where did
We
you
stayed in
stay?
Gatlinburg.
Gatlinburg. We're right next to Ober. Our property is like
Okay.
right there. So it's like, it's amazing. I love it. It's so cool.
Well, and I just for those of you that are listening, just so you know, we drove up and down the strip and walked all around in Gatlinburg, and every hotel was no vacancy, no vacancy, no vacancy. And
Mhm.
so that is a great area. Yes, a great area. So now that you found those properties in those vacation areas,
Mhm.
how did you determine, or how did you search out? And here's a big one. And I always tell all of my students, be sure you do your homework. How did you do your homework to find out about zoning, on what was acceptable? And did a lot of those vacation homes, are they trying to skate in under the wire, or is it an easy process in some of those vacation areas to determine that the zoning was okay to do a short-term rental?
Yeah. Absolutely. So Gatlinburg is a very interesting location. So the Smoky Mountains, the areas that we were looking in were Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Sevierville. And so these areas very much cater to real estate investors. There are a lot of short-term rentals, and so there are certain areas of the cities, the different cities, that are specifically for only residential. You can't have short-term rentals. But that was very well called out in the listings, which was very helpful. The other thing that we did, besides like calling the city and finding out where the areas are zoned and looking up the minutes of the meetings to make sure nothing was coming down the pike, was to find a really good short-term rental agent. So I worked as an agent for a number of years, but I worked with first-time home buyers, and working with real estate investors is a completely different animal.
Yes.
You need to find someone who's really an expert, because they're going to be able to tell you, okay, you're going to be able to get 30,000 per bedroom for this type of property in this location. And they're going to be able to get really into the nitty gritty with you, which is not going to be every agent out there because that's just not their expertise. So we were able to find an agent through this community called the Short Term Shop. I don't know if you're familiar with Avery Carl. She's the coolest.
I'm going to make a note.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh my gosh, she's brilliant. So basically she created, she was an agent, she's a broker, and she created brokerages in all of the short-term rental locations in which she buys property, where she personally invests.
Okay.
And so she's created this really cool community. She's written a really cool book. Yes, she has a book. The book is fantastic. It's called Short-Term Rentals, Long-Term Wealth. I would definitely recommend it.
Okay.
And so we were able to find an agent using her community, which was, I was like, this is really well connected. I want Avery to help me. And so, yeah, finding a team member, your team is everything. So finding a team member who could really facilitate that for us beyond doing our own due diligence was also very important.
Very good. That's all great advice. Super, super great advice. So now once I see Andorra, and is that you, Andorra, putting stuff? Yes. She put the Amazon link in, the short-term rental. But let's see. I think Andorra, that just went to host and panelist. You might want to see if you can put that link in for everyone. Make sure. Yeah, you're muted. Yeah, you're trying to be helpful. I see that. Yes, there you are.
Out there. Yeah, I will put the link to the book in the chat. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's
thank
just
you.
under host and panelists. I think since I made you a co-host, I think you can click for everyone.
Yep, I'll go ahead and do that now. Sorry.
Good. Okay, so Andorra's putting the link into the book. And this is Avery Carl's book. Is that who it is?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So now, Taylor, you have sold your long-term, did your homework, worked with an agent that has that niche that can find you those homes in those areas. And so now you've done your homework on zoning and purchased those properties. How did you decide what OTAs, and those are the online travel agencies like Airbnb, how did you decide what OTAs you wanted to be listed on?
Mhm. So when we first started, we knew that we wanted to, one, be on the platforms where people are. I personally, when I am booking short-term rentals, I always go on Airbnb. I will sometimes go on VRBO, sometimes on booking.com. And so I wanted to make sure that we were on those specific platforms. So currently we're on Airbnb and VRBO is owned by booking.com. So it's
Mhm.
also on that. And I think they have a third one that they're also a part of. And once I think probably in the next 6 months or so, we want to look into creating our own direct booking. I know there's a lot of revenue to be made that way, not having to deal with the fees of these other platforms. But as someone who's just getting started in short-term rentals, Airbnb and VRBO are great platforms to just kick it off. They really boost your listings within the first 30 days of you putting the listing on their website. So it's a great way to get traction, get reviews, get closer to being a super host, and just get in front of people. It's great because they do a lot of the marketing for you. So that's where we started out.
Well, I love that. So once you start doing more than one channel, how do you keep from getting a double booking? And these are even out of state. So do
Mhm.
you have what's called a channel manager? That's the route I went. And so just to kind of inform everyone that's listening, a channel manager is simply a software program that you can, once you set up your property on different channels like Airbnb, VRBO, booking.com, Expedia, whatever channels you put it on, then you connect all of those channels back to one software program, which is called a channel manager. And then that channel manager, you have different options. You can just buy the channel manager platform software. You can just subscribe to that, or you can subscribe to where you're on the channel manager and also a front office. And so the front office now gives you a screen that has all of your properties or all of your rooms on it. And you just go to your front office and you can move people around from room to room or from property to property, or you can block off a section if you're going to, be painting or doing some rehab. And when you do that on your front office, it pushes it backwards out to all of those channels. So you don't have to go into each individual channel and update. You update on your front office and it pushes it backwards out to all of those channels. And then the third level, if you wish, and this is where I think what Taylor was talking about, the third level then is that you can even purchase a website for yourself connected to that channel manager. And now anyone that books directly on your website and doesn't go through one of those channels, you don't have to pay commission, because you have to pay commission to all those channels for finding you that guest.
Mhm.
And so
Exactly.
if somebody books directly on your website connected to your channel manager, you don't have to pay those commissions. So am I to understand that you don't have that yet?
Yeah, so we don't have a direct booking site, but we do use Hospitable as our
Okay.
overarching
Mhm.
property management system. And as I mentioned before, my background is in operations and development, so I am a systems gal through and through.
Okay.
So I love a good system. So we have a few different systems set up, and I don't know if you'll dig into this in further questions, but we like to have everything talking to each other. So Hospitable is where all of our platforms come up into, and we do a lot of our automation there. So a lot of our automated messaging, for instance, an automated message that we just set up, which I'm so jazzed about, is for orphan nights. So when somebody books, if say they book a weekend and then the Monday is free, but then the next day there's people booked, I would really like if somebody would book that day. And so Hospitable allows us to put in an automated message that can send that automatically sends this to the guest and says, hey, there's a free night immediately after your stay. Would you like to book it for a 20% discount? And that just goes out. The guests can say yes, and then they extend their stay, and then that's additional revenue for you. But I don't have to lift a finger because Hospitable does it all for me. So
I love
all
that.
about creating that automation.
I love that. My platform also does some automation like that, so I'm going to look into that one. That's a great upsell. I love that. I love that. So how many different channel managers did you look at, or front office channel managers did you look at before you made a decision on the one you're using? Because
Yeah,
just so the audience knows, there's many out there.
So many.
And it's hard to know.
There are so many. Absolutely. We were looking mainly at Hospitable and Guestly. Those were the two main platforms that we were evaluating. We did really like a lot of the automation that we could do with Hospitable, and that's what allowed us to lean in that direction. Basically, if I can create enough systems that I don't have to look at things as much as I normally would, if I can like just check it once a week and I'm like good to go, that's the kind of system that I want to create. You know, work smarter, not harder. That is that is definitely my philosophy.
Oh, I totally agree. The two that I had narrowed it down to was Cloud Beds and Little Hotelier. And so I decided eventually to go with Cloud Beds, and I've been very happy with them. And it sounds like they have a lot of the same features. But anyway, just so as you know, for those of you that are listening, just know that there are several out there. And this is like real estate. And let me say this, there's never a bad deal in real estate. There's only good, better, or best. There's never a bad deal. And so when you start looking for properties, don't get stuck in trying to decide and then losing some really good deals because you didn't pull the trigger fast enough. So just know that there's no bad deals in real estate. There's only good, better, and best. And there's no bad channel managers. There's only good, better, and best. So don't get frozen shopping and looking and shopping and not do one. I say do one, even if later you decide to upgrade, because it'll make your life so much easier and not have to chase those different channels. And the more channels that you're on, the more bookings you get, because you're casting a wider net. More folks are seeing you, are finding you. So don't be afraid of going on more than one channel and adding a channel manager to your management.
Absolutely. Another thing I completely agree. And another thing I'll say to it too, when it comes to the individual channels that you go on, I think sometimes as new real estate investors, when you get onto Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, et cetera, whatever platform you're on, after the initial boost that you get from the platform, things kind of level out a little bit because there's, you know, other STRs in the area. And I think a lot of people can think like, oh, like I must be doing something wrong. Something's wrong with my property. Like, why am I not getting bookings? And take a breath, because everything is figure outable and you can totally fix it. With a lot of these platforms, just like with social media, it's all about the algorithm. So it literally means maybe go in and adjust your description ever so slightly every couple days. Go ahead and change your title, change your hero picture, and all of a sudden the algorithm's going to like you again and you'll start getting more views. So in those moments when you feel like this isn't working, like what am I doing wrong? I'm not getting bookings. Take a deep breath, make the algorithm happy, and you'll be good to go.
Eric said he needed that. He said he's going through that right now, 3 months in with VRBO. He said, so that's great advice. Now, what I do is I run by Google Calendar. It's like this is me without a brain, and this is me with a brain. So I run on Google Calendar because I run a whole international academy, as well as 24 rental doors, as well as short-term rentals and some midterm rentals and the long-term rentals. And so I definitely have to stay organized with my calendar. So I put it right on the calendar that every so many days I go in and adjust different platforms just for that reason. And I have it spread out in my calendar, so I don't have it all to do on the same day. And so one day I'll go in and I'll tweak, my social media, and another day I might tweak, my booking platforms, and another day I might tweak my channel manager. So anyway, I do that on an ongoing basis for that reason, and I actually schedule it. So I don't know if that's helpful for anyone. So just put it on the calendar.
Mm-hmm. Put it on the calendar. It's not happening.
Exactly. So describe to us, first of all, once you have these properties, and now you're advertising, so now bookings are coming in. What does the guest see? You send them an automated message, I'm sure, saying this is where the property is. And what type of a check-in? What does the guest go through to check in? Because you're not there. These are not properties that are close to you. So what does the guest receive to tell them how to check in?
Yeah, absolutely. So our closest property is 900 miles away. So definitely not close. So we have a few different automated messages that go to them. So the day before, we'll send them a message and say, we're so excited to have you stay. Here's the address of the property. Here's the details to be able to access the property, which includes the lockbox and parking and other details that they might need to know to actually access the property. But it's fairly straightforward. We have, between our properties, we've really tried to make it very easy for guests. Like, I want you to walk up to the door and there's no question how you get in the front door. The keypad is easily laid out. The instructions are very specific. And the other thing that we love to do, and if you are thinking about getting properties or you have one already, is make sure that you have a lockbox off to the side with a physical key, even if you have the touchpad for the lock, because they die. The battery goes, and sometimes you won't know. And then the guest is going to be there at 2 a.m. and be like, I can't get in. But it's okay because you have a physical key, and you can put that in the instructions. Like, if for some reason the keypad is not working and you cannot get in touch with me, there is a keypad. There is a lockbox. It's the same code. Grab the key, open the door. You're good to go. So make it easy for yourself, because that's going to happen. The lock is going to die, and you want the guest to know what to do. Like, what is the next step in the process if they can't get a hold of you, because you can't be available 24/7. So then after that initial walk into the house, the next morning we'll send them a message and we'll say, hey, just wanted to make sure that your first night went all right. We hope that you're enjoying your stay. And then we kind of stay hands off with it until we hear from them again. If we hear from them again, sometimes we won't hear from them at all. But we want to make sure that they know that we're there and helping them in anything that they might need. But we also, for us personally, we're like, you know what, we want you to enjoy your stay. And so that's the way that we handle it.
And I do mine very, very similar to that. And yes, I do have the lockbox with the key. And we learned the hard way. We were totally on the other side of town. A guest came for a wedding. They decided to run out for a few moments. They came back to get dressed to go to the wedding, and the battery had died in the keypad. Oh, no. And they called us and said, we don't want to miss the wedding. That's the whole reason we're here. How can we get in to get dressed? Now, we did not at that time have the lockbox with the key in it, but we had our own suite, owner's suite on the back of the property. And so we just bit the bullet. We said, you know what, go through the owner's suite. Here's our code.
Yep.
Worked out because they got through, they got dressed, they went on. And of course, as soon as we got back, we changed the batteries and everything, and all was well. But that was our lesson. And that was a tough one. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And we finally said, you know what, we're just going to have faith in human nature, that we're going to let them into our own private area to go through to their area. And it worked out. But anyhow, that's not something we'd want to do all the time. So we definitely added the lockbox. So, and Doris says great advice, but she said also put on the schedule for your cleaning person to change the batteries. Our maintenance person changes our batteries every 3 months. It's
very important.
On the calendar. Like I said before, has to be on the calendar. And our maintenance guy that does furnace checks and air checks, where he changes filters, makes sure light bulbs are not burned out, he changes the batteries, in the smoke detectors. He changes the batteries in the keyless entry locks. So he does all of that quarterly. And again, you just have to put that on the books, put it on the calendar so it gets done. So now, do you provide breakfast or food of any kind in any of your properties? What do you
Yeah.
provide?
So we don't at this time. We found, so when we first started, we were trying to provide, like gift baskets and like cute things for them to come. But we found that people were either leaving them behind or there weren't things that people liked in there. You don't know what people's allergies are. So we decided that it was in our best interest to just stop doing that. And it's actually been better since we've stopped. I think there can sometimes be the pressure to feel like you have to have the welcome basket, like it's very important or else they're going to hate their stay. And I don't think that's true. I've been to plenty of short-term rentals and stayed there and nobody left me anything and I was totally fine because I wasn't expecting it. So at this time we don't, because we just ran into too many problems by doing it.
Okay, I get that. Now I do provide a coffee maker, coffee pot and all of
Yes.
that. And I do provide coffee because I'm one of those that sometimes if I get in really late one night, the next morning, I do want my cup of coffee in the morning. So we do make sure that our rooms have waters and coffee and decaf and all the stuff that goes with that, the creamers, the sugars. And I simply buy the little pods and the packets. I order it off of Amazon. And then, whenever, if I clean, I put it in. If somebody else cleans, whoever's cleaning the room, flipping the room, getting it ready for the guest, just make sure that they have a supply of the coffee, decaf, waters, tea bags, that sort of thing. So yeah, Andor just said tea is a great thing to have and bottled water. So I do that because it's something that I can order in advance from Amazon and just have it available for whoever's flipping the room to put it in there. So that works really well. So I like that. Now, how about your linens and those types of supplies? First of all, where do you have a place where you like to purchase? Or do you just kind of wherever you see something on sale? And how often do you feed in new stuff? How often do you update like comforters and sheets and towels, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically will do our orders from Amazon
Okay.
purely for the convenience factor of being able to actually get them to our cleaners. If a towel all of a sudden goes missing, which happens all the time, someone accidentally packs it into their suitcase and you need to get an extra of that same type of linen, it's really easy to go back and look and be like, okay, I'm going to get the same exact one so they all match. So we really like Amazon for that, for that reason, and also how easy it is to keep track of everything. And then as far as replacement, so we typically will replace linens every year
Okay.
to make sure that they are, looking fresh. We do white linens because everyone likes white. You can see that it's clean. And so we want to make sure there's no stains or anything yucky going on. So we typically will change those out annually.
I get that. Yep, that's very important. How many sets do you have for each? For example, for each bed, how many sets of complete linens do you have for each bed?
So we typically will have 4 sets per bed.
Okay. Now, run through why 4. I have 3 because one on the bed, one in the wash, and one is a backup in case something gets damaged. Why 4?
Yeah, so the reason that we have 4 is in case they can't get through washing everything, there's a backup to the backup.
Okay. Okay.
So because there are a lot of bedrooms in some of these houses, sometimes it is challenging to get through all of the washes. And like I said, some laundry does disappear suddenly. So we like to just have a backup to the backup. But 3, I think the way that you just described it is perfect. So maybe I'll be changing it up and doing 3 instead of 4 going forward.
Well, and again, especially with your on Amazon Prime, where you can get a delivery within a day or two, especially if you've picked something out of Amazon that they normally carry in the warehouse. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can usually get that within 24 hours. And so if you did have to replace something, you could probably get it replaced rather quickly using Amazon. So again, good tip for all of our listeners. Yes. And Dora says, and makeup wipes are good to provide. Have you had problems with makeup on your white linens?
We haven't. We actually have makeup towels. So they
Okay.
say we have black makeup towels that say makeup on them that we lay out. And so that's been really helpful at really saving our white towels.
And where did you find those?
Amazon.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So you heard it here, guys, as you're getting ready to set up your first short-term rental, either have some makeup wipes or have some black towels. And then when they do the linen, do they have to wash those black ones separate, or can they wash them in with the others? Because I'm assuming they probably can bleach your white stuff if there's any stains, but do they have to wash the black makeup towels separate then?
That's a great question. I am not sure. That has never come up. Our cleaners are just like, all right, we're good. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's just one of those things that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Would I do those
I never
separate?
thought about that. It's a good point.
Yeah. Now, so the big question, these properties are not close to you. How did you find the right cleaning maintenance people? How do you find those people?
So I think regardless of the location, it's hard to find good people who are going to be reliable. But I think some of the biggest resources that I've found when it comes to particularly maintenance people is local owner Facebook groups. So other people, other real estate investors who own in that specific location, the recommendations that they provide are just invaluable, honestly, because they know that these people are reliable. They've worked with them for long periods of time. So that's how we found all of our maintenance people. And then for cleaners, we actually use, it used to be called Turnover B&B, but it's called Turno now. They just rebranded. And it's a great platform. I've mentioned before, I love my systems. And so Turno allows you to select a cleaner in your area based off of reviews. And it's just basically a marketplace for cleaners. You can choose a primary cleaner, a backup cleaner in case something happens with your primary cleaner. And it's very easy to swap them out if something happens where you're no longer happy with the service that you're getting from your cleaner. You can easily change to a new cleaner, and you can push your calendars right to the cleaner. So you don't actually have to do any like communication with them. The app communicates with your other software, and then they just go when there's a turn and it shows up on their calendar, and you don't need to do any communication unless there's some issue that you need to talk about.
Now that's interesting. I'm wondering with the Turno website, if it connects with all channel managers or whether you have to be strategic on what channel manager you choose so that your calendar does push over to them. So, okay. So for those of you that are listening, reverse engineer that. If you are going to use Turno website for your cleaners, find out what channel managers that their calendar, that your calendar will actually push over to them from your channel manager so that you don't have to do that independent conversation every single time you have a flip or somebody stays an extra day or whatever. Jessica wants to know, what was the first way that you found your maintenance? Taylor said she goes to the Facebook groups, the local Facebook groups local to that property. And there's all kinds of real estate Facebook groups there. And oftentimes there's some referral groups for, who's a good roofer, who's a good, I don't know, gutter person, who's a good landscaper, who's, and then everyone in the group responds. And oftentimes you'll see the same name in several
over
different,
and over.
And you're thinking, oh, that's the guy I want because everybody's recommending him. Yeah.
And if you're new to one of those Facebook groups and you're not quite ready to make a post, you can also just search maintenance recommendations, and typically a bunch of stuff will pop up. And just exactly like Kathy was saying, you'll see the same name over and over again. So that way you can save time. You don't have to post yourself. You can just do some research. And if you don't find what you're looking for, then you can do a post.
I needed a slate roof guy. So I just went to one of those Facebook groups this morning in the area where my property is. And I just searched in the little search bar at the top of the group, not of the whole Facebook, but just the top of that group. And I put in slate roof, and like 20 slate roof guys came up. And so then I went through, and this one guy was referred like 4 or 5 times. And so guess who I called? That's who I called. And I'm meeting tomorrow at 11 o'clock to look at my slate roof. So
That's awesome.
that's how easy that is. So Jessica, I hope that answered your question. Now, how do you handle problems? If a guest is having a problem, do you now have to get, because your cleaners are, you're managing, right? You're managing your own
Yes.
properties. It's not like you're paying. Now, again, for those of you that are listening, you could hire a management company to do all of this, but you're going to pay a good portion of your rental income for that management company if you didn't want to do any of this management. But I do my own management. Taylor does her own management. And so Taylor, how do you handle those problem guests?
Yeah. They're going to happen. That I think that's one of the, like, we want to believe that they won't, but they're honestly such a small percentage. I would say it's probably like 5% of 95% are amazing guests. And then the 5% are kind of, and so usually it's just about good communication. If it's something that they need, I'm really big on just like Instacarting them, whatever it is they want. Like if there's some issue that they have that I can't resolve for whatever reason, and they don't want my cleaner to come drop things off, I'll send an Instacart to drop off a thing. And that's really easy. Someone else can do that for you. And so that's one of the ways that we handle it. Another way that we handle issues, we're not huge on giving refunds because usually you get like those discount hunters who are just like looking for a discount. Instead, what we like to do when we're trying to solve an issue, whatever it might be, we need to get a cleaner out, we need to get a maintenance person out, we'll say, hey, we're going to give you $100, $150 to go out to dinner for a couple hours. And then when you come back, your issue will be resolved. And it doesn't give them a refund on like the stay per se, but it makes them feel like they're getting something. It's also getting them out of the house for at least 2 hours so you can take care of whatever the issue is. So at the end of the day, this is a hospitality business. So you really just need to understand where the guest is coming from, share the empathy, understand the problem, dissect how you can get it resolved as quickly as possible, and then create a situation that's going to make them happy. At the end of the day, you can't make every guest happy. That's not, unfortunately, it's just not going to be always the way. We just had a guest this weekend. Nothing we did would make them happy. And it is what it is. And you have to just be like, okay, moving on from that. But yeah, so it's just communicating with the guests as much as possible in the application. Make sure that you're doing all communication inside, especially with Airbnb, within the application, so that if there is any issue that you need to call Airbnb about later, that whole record, there's a whole transcript of that record so that you can fight anything that comes up that you might need to. So keep it in the app, make the guest happy, and just go with the flow.
Now, Taylor, we've got a bunch of folks on the call that are just newbies. They're either just getting started or they haven't even started yet. Give us an example, and without mentioning any names, give us an example of what a problem might have been. Just because a lot of folks are like, what is a problem guest? What does that mean? What makes them a problem?
Absolutely. So the issue that, for instance, the issue that happened this weekend, our cleaner, for whatever reason, missed the turn. And that obviously is not good. The guest arrived, the place was dirty, and we were like trying to get in touch with the cleaner. And we did everything. She was like, okay, we can come over, but the guest didn't want the cleaner to come. And they were like, no, it's fine. We're just gonna do it. But they were like, this is awful. We're going to clean the linens, but we don't like it. And I was like, well, we're going to get them. We're going to have it cleaned for you. But no matter what we offered, they just didn't want to relent on anything. We were going to send the cleaner, we were going to send new linens. And then the next day we were also going to drop them more materials, whatever they wanted, whatever they needed. But really what they wanted was just a discount. And so we tried to send them out to dinner to bring the cleaner, but they didn't want it. And so sometimes you're just going to run up against that, where they just like, nothing you say is going to make them happy. And it's just the cost of doing business sometimes.
I understand that. Our biggest hurdle that we had, and again, this is such a freaky thing. We had a couple that stayed, and I'll say, not that I'm young, but I'll say an elderly couple. And they were driving a very nice vehicle. They left to go to whatever event they were going to. And we're out at dinner. We were having dinner. And I have an outside camera on our parking area. So that way I know when a guest has arrived. And so I'm just kind of that way, I'm kind of on alert, make sure they get through the door okay. I know that they're just now arriving. And so I might even, follow up and say, hey, just make sure you got in okay. Kind of like you, just checking with you to make sure all is well. So anyway, they had checked in the night before. This was now their second day. They left to go to their event. The camera flashes that, the camera had been activated. So I glanced to see, and I'm like, oh, it's just them coming back from wherever. And I see him or her, I didn't know who at the time, because it was a couple. I see them driving out through our yard. They drove off of the driveway and they're driving out through the yard. And now they circled back around, and now there's a whole patio. And so now they're behind the patio and they're just sitting there with the headlights on. And so we're thinking, did something happen? Did he have a health episode of some sort? Because now they're not getting out of the vehicle. The vehicle's just running with the lights on, and they're just sitting there. So we're like, what should we do? So we said, okay, well, and we weren't very far away. We weren't there at the time, but we weren't very far away. So we said, let's drive over and make sure everything's okay. So we drive over, and as we pull in, Mark made an observation. He said, we really don't know this couple personally. And he said, they don't know us personally. He said, I hate for them to think that, in the dark, that we were accosting them in any way. So he goes, I don't think we should go up and start knocking around on the windows of the vehicle.
Yeah. So
we actually ended up calling our local law enforcement, and we said, we don't think it's anything serious, but we don't know that. We don't know if there's a medical condition. We don't. But they drove out into the yard, and now they're stuck in the yard, and we are concerned about approaching them. And the officer said, we'll come right over. So they came over, and two officers approached the car, and the wife gets out, and you can tell she's a little aggravated, and she kind of puffs her way into the house. And we just stayed in our vehicle. We didn't confront them at all. And so finally the officer comes over to us, and he says, the mister has had a little too much to drink. He said, that's all that's wrong. And he said, and she's promised to come out and make sure that he gets into the house when he's ready to get out of the vehicle. And he said, we're going to get their vehicle out of your yard. He said, can you move your patio furniture? And he said, and one of the officers is going to drive the vehicle over onto the driveway. And so we got out of our car and moved the patio furniture. The officer then drove the guest vehicle onto the driveway. And by then the husband was sitting at the patio table. And we said, then, of course, we were out of our car by then, and we said, are you okay? And he was like, I'll be fine. He said, she'll come and get me in a minute. And so here she comes, and she came out and got him and took him in the house, and all was well. But anyway,
oh my gosh, that's wild.
So just to give our listeners, an idea of what could happen.
Yes. Yes. So, our very first guest at the first STR that we bought, they actually drove through our front of our house.
Oh my.
So yeah, I mean, everything ended up being fine. Everyone was fine. The house was fine. It was a great way to kick off the journey. So you just gotta laugh, because these things, they happen, and they're so wild, you just would never expect.
But they're so few and far between. So yes. For those of you that are listening, this is not the norm. This is not going to happen. No. This is like the only one we've had, and we've been in business since 2016. And this was the only one that we just really didn't know what to do. And, and with today's news, we thought, well, we don't want to get shot. We don't want them to think we're accosting them. So that's why we said, you know what, we really need to just in case there was a medical emergency, we needed
Yeah.
to get somebody else involved. And,
That was
and
smart.
so it just turned out that he had too much to drink. So, so all was well. So anyway, Taylor, tell us, what are you doing now? Because you have now made a segue from actually getting your first B&B, finding the property, getting through zone. What I'm doing, I have the free meetup, which is what you're on right now, and then I have a course and I have a mastermind. What is it that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I run a boot camp. It's a 4-week accelerated boot camp to help people get from where they are right now to hopefully by the end of the program, feeling the confidence to actually purchase their first or next investment property. So when I first got started in real estate, I didn't know anything. I started by accident. I didn't know anyone who was doing it, and I just kind of learned by failing and succeeding and just kind of going through the motions. And so I want to help other people learn from the things that I did, and the things that I've learned over the last 5 years of doing this. So this boot camp really focuses on that. It's a mix of live and pre-recorded modules so that you can take it at your own pace. And I just want to help you be successful. Like, let's all make money and achieve our goals and do the things that we want to do.
I love that. Yes, the tide rises all ships. Eric says, do you have any guest books, informational guides at the rentals to help the guests that are visiting the area for the first time, like property information, restaurants nearby, things to do? Do you have that in the rooms?
Yeah, so what we actually do is we have a virtual guest book because things are constantly changing. So we have a virtual guest book that we provide to our guests where we can update when new things come along. And we'll also sometimes send, if there's some type of event that's happening that's doesn't happen very often type of event. Like there's there's some sort of like whiskey tasting at Ober this weekend, which I was like, that sounds really awesome. Like I want to go. But
Of course you can go, you can go to Gatlinburg and do whiskey tasting any day of the week because
so true. So true. And so we'll send, some information about that separately to the guests. Just be like, hey, just a heads up. Like, I don't know if you know, this is happening in town this weekend when you're going to be there during this day. But yeah, so we have a virtual guest book. And we also send out that. The other thing that I'll say about guest books, list that yes, there is a link that we provide in the message. There's also a way that you can hook up a virtual guest book in the platform. I'm not 100% sure how to do it, but I know there's a way to do it. So that would be something to look into if you're looking to make that a little bit more automated for yourself. I know when I first got started, I was like, I gotta have a guest book or else I can't go live. And I would say, do not let the guest book be the thing that holds you back from going live. Go live and then do the guest book. Yeah. Because the going live is way more important than the guest book. If guests have questions, they'll ask you. But yes, at this point now, we do have a virtual one. And yes, there is a way to make that more manual. I hope that helps.
Yeah. I actually have a paper copy of some information because some of my guests are older and they really don't like all of the electronic automation stuff. It was a stretch for them to use the keyless entry to get in the door. So if they have to like get out their phone and smartphone and try to, click on a link or whatever, and then try to read it, that's really not for them. So I do both. I actually have an electronic guest book, the informational book, but I also have a paper copy that I have in each room.
That's awesome.
So hopefully that answers the questions. And so Taylor, put in the actual chat to everyone, make sure it says everyone, how they can get in touch with you about your boot camp in case anyone is interested. And I will also put in the chat how folks can get in touch with me in case you want to connect with my course or mastermind as well. Now, here's what I'm doing. And I'll just toss that out there. I'm getting ready to start my mastermind, and my mastermind is I'm only going to take like 10 folks. And so go to kathybinner.com, scroll down, send me a message inside my website that you're interested in being in the mastermind, because the first 10 members are going to be for free. And you'll be my founding members,
Ooh.
because we're just now starting the mastermind for the B&B. And so you will be a founding member. So first 10 is free. So just so you know. Taylor, can you share the cost of your boot camp, or would you prefer to just have them click through and go through your sales page?
Yeah, so there are a few different options because I know that everybody's at different stages of, where they are and what they can do financially. So there are 3 different options. So one option is paid in full. I think right now I honestly have to pull it up and tell you what it is. But there's a pay in full. And so with the pay in full, you actually get 2 one-on-one 1-hour coaching sessions with me. So we're able to really dig in. And so that's in addition to the 4-week boot camp. I find that people really like that because then they can have 2 meetings during the course of the 4 weeks and really like build out that roadmap and get ready to go, because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of specific questions that people have. And then I have a payment plan that is available as well, if that is something that you need. And then the last option, you are able to get one-on-one coaching call for me. And so the pricing and everything is right on my website, but you have options depending on what you're looking for and what you're hoping to get out of the program.
Okay, so here's what I'll say just from listening to both of us. If you have time and you're not ready to pull the trigger and you just kind of want to get immersed in the whole short-term rental business, jump in on the first 10 for me and do it for free. If you're ready to pull the trigger and you want to go faster, get in touch with Taylor, because she'll get you there in 4 weeks. And we're only going to do one mastermind call a month. So to get that number of that amount of help from me, you're going to be in my program for a few months. You can pull the trigger and be working in your short-term rental in 4 weeks with Taylor. So, so just keep that in mind. There's some options for everyone on the table now. So now, no excuses now. You guys are going to be able to get out there and get your first short-term rental and start making money. And here's what, and this is for Faye that's doing long-term. And I know Andora's got some long-term. Here's the general rule of thumb. Now, everything always has an exception, but here's the general rule of thumb. When you find a property, you're going to find out what the market is for long-term rents for that property. If that property is in an area where you could midterm rent that, say to traveling nurses, whatever, where you're going to rent it for at least 30 days, but less than a year, somebody, corporate housing, traveling nurses, that sort of thing, that's all considered midterm. You're going to get about twice the rent that you would get for long-term. And if that property is in an area that you can short-term, where it's also in like a little vacation area, maybe it's close to a lake, maybe it's close to, a popular area that people like to travel to, you can get 4 times the rent. That's just a rule of thumb. But just so you know, if you're thinking about, I want to get into buy and holds, real estate that I'm going to rent out. Now, once you have it purchased, you can decide, am I going to long-term, midterm, short-term? But here's my best advice. Make sure the long-term numbers work. Don't say, I have to get this 4 times the rent in order to pay the mortgage, because then if for some reason you don't like doing short term, or if for some reason you for whatever reason, you have to just long-term rent it, but zoning changes or whatever, make sure that the numbers work for long-term. That way you're never upside down in that property. That way you always have cash flow. So Taylor, what do you suggest there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree. And the other thing too is, at the end of the day, the great thing about real estate is it's a real asset. So if things don't work out, you can just sell it. That I think a lot of times, a lot of real estate investors will get hung up on, like, I have 3,000 doors, but those 3,000 doors make them like, $50 a month, and they end up not being able to generate the cash flow that they want. So if it's not working out, you can sell it and you can make more ROI on something else. So just know your numbers and make decisions that feel right in the moment. And you got this. Don't worry. It's not as scary as it seems.
And that's what the mastermind for me and the boot camp for Taylor is all about, is making sure that you know how to work those numbers, because that's the first place that you need to start. So any questions from anyone, put it in the chat and we'll try to answer your questions.
And something else that I didn't mention when we were talking about systems, in case anybody else has any questions regarding systems. Another system that we use, and Kathy, you may use it as well, it's called Price Labs. And so Price Labs will sync with your platforms, and it will adjust your pricing based on the demand that's happening in the area. That can be another reason that your property may not be booking. If you're charging $250 a night every single night of the year, that probably doesn't make sense. It needs to kind of ebb and flow. Like, for instance, in Boston, around the Boston Marathon, I'm probably going to charge, you know, at least $500 a night or more. It doesn't make sense to do, you know, $250 a night. And so Price Labs will help you do that. So that's another platform I'd recommend looking into.
I love it. Anyone else? Eric had a question. He wanted to know how to get in touch with me, and just go to kathybinner.com and just send me a message through the contact page. Anyone else? Taylor, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. And gosh, I can't wait to can I find your properties somewhere? What's an easy way to find your properties?
Yeah, I have everything linked specifically on my Instagram, the link in my bio. You can see that. We're currently renovating our 7th property right now. It's an 1850s farmhouse in Vermont that is going to be a short-term rental. So definitely follow along with that journey, because it is wild.
Well, I just scheduled to look at an 1859 property in Middleport, Ohio, right on the Ohio River, for a bed and breakfast. So I just scheduled a walkthrough on that one. So,
so fun.
So I'm excited. So you guys can do this. You guys can do this.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy. This has been great.
Yes, thank you. Now, for those of you that want to go back and go through this again, listen to any of our other calls, you can go to kathybinner.com and just scroll down to the free event for opening a bed and breakfast, guest house, VRBO, Airbnb, all the above. Just scroll down to the free meetup and click through there, and it will take you right into the platform where all the replays are held. So you can listen to any of our replays. We interview a different person every month. So tons and tons of valuable information on all of those calls. So feel free to go back and listen to as many. Andorra was our guest, last month or the month before? It wasn't a couple months. Andorra was our guest. And so you can hear how she did her. And so go back and listen to some of those replays. And Taylor, thank you so much for being on. And Dora, thank you for being my co-host today, along with Taylor, because I'm having slow problems. So thank you, everyone, and we will see everyone next month. Talk to you later.
Great session. Great session today. Thanks.
Yes.
Bye, Dora.
Bye-bye. Oh, Faye, did you have a question?